All right, so today we're taking a deep dive, and it's maybe not where you'd expect, but I think it's going to be pretty fascinating.
I think so.
We're going to be talking about purification rituals in ancient Israel.
That's right.
And specifically, what it was like for women after childbirth, and sort of the beliefs that surrounded that whole transition.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be looking at a passage from Leviticus chapter 12.
Yeah, chapter 12.
And this chapter really lays out a lot about how the Israelites at the time viewed purity and the human body.
And sacred.
Yeah.
It's all very much tied together in their worldview.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting because, like you read this and you think like, oh, wow, this is so far removed from like how we think about things today. But at the same time, it makes you kind of stop and think like, well, do we have rituals today?
Oh, absolutely.
Do we have things that we do that, come from, maybe not for the same place, but sort of address the same needs or
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I find so fascinating about studying these ancient texts is that they can really make us look inward.
Yeah, yeah.
And ask ourselves, what are our assumptions about the world? How do we view the body? How do we understand these transitions in life?
Right.
And sometimes you find surprising parallels.
Yeah.
Even though the specific practices are very different.
Right. And so like right off the bat, this chapter says that women were considered like ritually unclean after childbirth.
Yeah. Unclean is the word that's used.
Unclean. Yeah. And so like what's going on there? Like what does that even mean in this context?
Well, it's important to remember that for the ancient Israelites, the idea of ritual purity was incredibly important. It wasn't just about hygiene.
Yeah.
It was about being in right relationship with God,
right,
with the community, with the sacred.
Yeah.
And so certain bodily fluids like blood were seen as having the potential to disrupt that purity. And so after childbirth, a woman was considered to be in this state of ritual impurity. And she needed to go through a process of purification in order to be restored to a state of wholeness.
Okay, so it's like not like she's like bad or, morally, tainted. It's just like there's this like...
Right, it's about this sense of order and balance, and she's kind of been taken out of that order through this natural process.
Okay.
And so the rituals are about restoring her back into that right relationship.
But what's interesting too is like it says that the period of uncleanliness is different for a boy versus a girl.
Yeah, that's one of the things that immediately jumps out.
Yeah.
7 days for a boy, but 14 for a girl.
Like why the difference?
Well, that's a question that has puzzled scholars for centuries.
Yeah.
There are a number of theories out there.
Yeah.
Some people have suggested that it might have something to do with the relative difficulty of childbirth.
Okay.
Maybe female babies were seen as being more challenging and therefore leading to a longer period of impurity. But, other scholars have connected it to societal rules.
Okay.
Maybe there were anxieties about female sexuality and power, and so a longer period of separation was deemed necessary.
Interesting. Okay. So it's like, we don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure, but it's fascinating to think about.
It's really interesting to like think about, the possible reasons and like what that tells us about like their worldview, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So the woman is considered unclean for this period of time, right?
Right.
And during that time, what are some of the restrictions placed on her?
So during this time, she's not allowed to touch anything holy.
Okay.
She's not allowed to enter the sanctuary.
And the sanctuary, this is
the Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
The most sacred space in the temple.
Like even the priest could only go in there like once a year, right?
That's right.
So this is like a really big deal.
Absolutely. And it really underscores the importance of ritual purity. These spaces, these objects held a powerful connection to the divine.
Right.
And any disruption to that sacredness had to be addressed.
Okay, so how is it addressed then? Like, how does the woman go from the state of uncleanliness back to a state of purity?
So at the end of the purification period, she has to bring a sacrifice to the temple.
Okay.
And the sacrifice is pretty specific. It's a year-old lamb and a bird. Or if the family couldn't afford a lamb, they could offer 2 birds.
So there's like a sliding scale almost?
Yeah, exactly. It takes into account their economic situation.
Right.
Which I think is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So they bring these animals.
Right.
And then what happens?
So the priest performs a ritual.
Okay.
He takes the animals and he offers them up to God. And through this act of sacrifice, the woman is restored to a state of ritual purity.
Okay, so the priest is like acting as a mediator almost.
Exactly. He's the intermediary between the woman and God.
Right, right.
And this really highlights the authority of the priesthood in ancient Israel. They were the gatekeepers of the sacreds. They were the ones who had the power to mediate between the human and the divine.
Wow. So we've got all this like really rich symbolism and ritual and like a whole system of beliefs.
Yeah, it's a whole worldview. It's a way of understanding the body, the divine, the relationship between humanity and God.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said at the beginning, like it's so different from, how we view things today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it really does make you stop and think, like what are our rituals?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the things that we do to mark these transitions in life?
Yeah, do we have ways of acknowledging the power of childbirth?
Right.
The changes that it brings about.
The sacredness of it even.
Absolutely. And I think that's a question that each of us can kind of ponder on our own.
Yeah. And, maybe even do a little digging and see like, okay, what are some traditions, from different cultures, from different time periods, and like, how do they compare to what we saw, back in ancient Israel?
Yeah, I think that would be a fascinating exploration.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a really, really interesting deep dive. And thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.